Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Dennis Chetere. Extremely happy to be part of this webinar representing AUD and EPAD. As you clearly laid out the concerns that we face on the continent, we realize that bad policies have hindered the uptake of technology. And if we are aware, science, technology, and innovation is seen by the AUD and EPAD, or African Union, being at the epicenter of Africa's transformation. That is as per the Agenda 2063. So I look forward to taking part, and I say hi to colleagues and all the participants. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. K. Last but not least, we have Dr. Francis Nangayo, a Senior Manager and Head Policy and Regulatory Affairs at AATF. And our pride ecologist, Francis is a leading expert on biosafety and regulatory affairs regarding seed and agricultural produce with experience in agricultural research, technology testing, regulatory compliance, and policy advocacy. Welcome, Francis.
Thank you very much, moderator, and thank you all participants for joining in. It is indeed my pleasure to share with you our experiences as AATF on the subject of enabling environment, which, as you know, is an integral component for sustainable commercialization of innovative agricultural technologies. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis. Thank you, our panelists, for taking time to be part of this important discussion today, and welcome all our participants. Now let's remind ourselves on the rules of engagement that since we have the speakers on board. We will kick off our discussion today with 10-minute presentations from our panelists. Thereafter, we'll invite questions from you, the audience, for further discussion. You are also all encouraged to post your questions and comments on the chat box, and we will collect them for response by the panelists. We are requesting the panelists to stick to the 10 minutes allocated. Let's have a little bit of a manifesto video before we start the presentations.
We believe that the future of Africa lies in its vast land. We believe the future is in the hands of those who walk the fields. For those are the hands that feed nations and ensure a better and more productive Africa. We believe in those hands, and that is why we too bring our hands in support of them. Our hands come bearing technologies and solutions that ensure their effort is not in vain, but deliver results that ensure a sustainable, prosperous, and food-secure Africa. At AATF, we are driving transformation of livelihoods in sub-Saharan Africa through innovative agricultural technologies that deliver results. We promise to deliver prosperity through technology.
So dear participants, that is our promise as AATF. May I now invite Mr. Benjamin Philippe to talk to us about plant variety protection and its role in sustaining investments in agriculture. The floor is yours, Benjamin.
Thank you very much, moderator. It's a real pleasure to be here. And again, I would like to take this opportunity to really thank the African Agricultural Technology Foundation for all the great work you are doing in relation to promotion of agriculture, and in particular, how innovation is important in agriculture. We are very happy to participate to this webinar today. And I would like to take this opportunity of this presentation to go more into the details of how UPOV and an effective plant variety protection system could help in sustaining agriculture and its investment in agriculture. And it was very good to invite UPOV to have a presentation on this topic, especially to provide some example, concrete fact and figures about how it helps to transform agriculture and enhance the availability of new varieties of plants, but also the development and the commercialization of the new varieties of plants. What I would like to do is just to take some concrete example with some UPOV members in order to highlight those elements. The first example I will take is Vietnam, because Vietnam became a member of UPOV in 2006, and we have some clear evidence about the clear impact and socioeconomic benefits that the UPOV membership, together with the effective plant variety protection system, brought to the agricultural sector and the farmers. This came from a study, independent study that was made 10 years after the UPOV membership of Vietnam, and the first conclusion and illustration is about the impact for farmers, especially about how their income has increased by more than, in average, 24% since 2006, since Vietnam became a member of UPOV. And you can see on the graph here the impact direct of plant breeding activities and the fact that farmers can now access to those new improved varieties that allow them to produce more, to produce better, and to also have a better production in terms of yield and production, quality of production. This was the second element of this study, highlighting the fact that before, the increase in terms of agricultural productivity was mainly due to inputs, but thanks to plant breeding and new varieties of plant, the annual land productivity since 2006 has increased for the main crops in Vietnam, for more than 1% to more than 3%, from rice to sweet potato, which means that without those activities and access in terms of new varieties and plant breeding, the current annual yields in this country will have been lower from about 15 to 30% for the main major crops. This is already a big impact and interesting information. But you can imagine that as long as farmers produce more and better, it has a huge impact on the GDP of the country, because if the agricultural sector is adding to the GDP, and it was the case for Vietnam, for all different types of crops in Vietnam, for arable farming, horticulture, floriculture, it added more than 5 billion to the GDP, which represent more than 2% of the GDP. So that's a good illustration that if you really want to raise a strong economy, it starts with a strong and robust agricultural sector. Let's take now another example closer to where you are, AETF, in Kenya, where Kenya was the second UPOV members in Africa back in '99. And you see the evolution of, taking the example of the cut flower industry, how both in terms of volume and value, the business has grown, which represent now more than 600 million in terms of industry value. But it also had a second direct impact about employment, because now more than 500,000 people are directly involved in the flower industry in Kenya. So it does have a direct impact on the economy and in the employment rate. We have a very good video illustrating this success case in Kenya, available on our upov.int website, where it illustrates how the cut floor industry, now representing more than $500 million, has really had a positive impact for Kenyan farmers, Kenyan growers, and the agriculture sector as well. I'll take another example from California, and especially taking this example about the good work of National Public Breeding Institute. This is a case of a university, UC Davis, that has a very strong breeding program in strawberry that has helped Californian growers to benefit from this knowledge and those very good varieties to build a strong strawberry agricultural production in California. But what is interesting also, thanks to the hard work of those public breeders, is how other countries can benefit. And we have the example on Spain that has grown in terms of the Spanish strawberry industry that represents now more than $1 billion, and using about 70 to 80, 90% of those same variety bred by public university plant breeders based in California. So that's also very interesting in terms of impact locally and globally, and how the knowledge and the technology can be transferred also thanks to plant breeding and the enabling environment. The last example I will take is about Argentina. I won't spend too much time on this one, and I can go more into details if you have any question, but this is a very good illustration of good coordination and the nice relationship between genetic resources and its smart and sustainable use, but also how it could be used for further plant breeding activities in order to develop new varieties based on genetic resources available that are of interest for local growers and farmers that will fit for a specific needs. And here there was a very smart system with the Ministry of Agriculture, with the National INTA Institute and INASE, that brings back some income to the local community using local genetic resources in order to improve it to the needs of the farmers and the growers, and benefiting growers and consumer at the end in order to develop varieties of flower that is of interest. So there is a clear relationship between genetic resources, it maintains its use, and plant breeding activity in order to continue to innovate to the changing needs and demand. Because it's clear that if we want to address food security in a climate change environment, we also need to find smart way to have a better use of our land available. And if we want to produce the same or to produce more, keeping a good balance with biodiversity, we also need to make a very smart use of arable land available for farmers. And that's where new improved variety can really help to address this challenge. The other element I would like to address is about critical components for plant variety protection strategy. Here you have the example of Latin American countries that join UPOV and the impact in their country right after joining UPOV about the numbers of varieties protected both by resident and non-resident. And you see that there was a big increase and now a high number of varieties available, protected, and then available for farmers. And this was also confirmed in the Vietnam studies 10 years after their UPOV membership about the number of varieties, all types that are being protected. Here you can see that it's now more than 250 new varieties every year that are protected, and you can imagine being made for the farmers. And you can compare with neighboring countries that are not yet members of UPOV. So there is also here a clear relationship and impact, because if you want to reach and address the needs of each of those individual farmers, you need to create this relationship between breeding activities and farmer needs. And here there is a very important channel, that layer that is on the production and distribution layer. Whatever new varieties being bred by national, international institute, public or private, but you need a very strong network of seed producer, seed propagator, plant reproducer, and distributor. And the fact that you have a strong and effective IP system that allow you to guarantee the quality of the variety released to the farmers, and also a way to diffuse through license those best improved variety, guarantee the fact that farmers will have access to high quality plants and high quality seeds, and at the same time refer back some information and income to any types of breeders that will be incentivized to continue their plant breeding activity. So just to focus on the scope for Africa, here you can see the members of UPOV in Africa: Kenya, Republic of Tanzania, South Africa, OAPI, and the 17 member states covered by the regional organization, Morocco, Tunisia, and Egypt, our last UPOV members, and some other countries that are in the process initiating the procedure to become member, namely Zimbabwe and Nigeria. And just to highlight on what the delegation of Egypt mentioned when they became member of UPOV back in 2019, to highlight the fact that this will be crucial for farmers, and especially smallholder farmers, to get access to quality seed at a fair price in order to produce nutritious food and meet demand of a growing population and better opportunities local and abroad for income for farmers. So, Mr. Chair, moderator, dear participant, what we wanted to also explain there is what to do in order to increase the adoption of PVP legislation within Africa. And here we have a series of publications and short videos available on our website. And this is a first very good step in order to diffuse information, explain what PVP and UPOV is about, and provide accurate information. And I will say to conclude that what AITF is doing is exactly what Africa needs in terms of creating this enabling environment to continue for the good work of innovation in agriculture in Africa, safeguarding and commercializing good new improved variety. And for that, we would like to pay a big thank you to your organization and the opportunity to explain more about that. Thank you very much, and I will be happy to take any question afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that informative presentation, Benjamin. It is interesting to note that UPOV system the UPOV system with plant protection for providing plant protection is very effective and an incentive for plant breeding that results in development of new improved varieties of benefit for farmers. Thanks again for that. Now our next presenter is Dr. John Mukuka. We are humbled by your presence today, John. Please speak to us about variety release in the regional harmonization context and how COMESA is championing this to enhance commercialization. Over to you, John. John, are you on mute?
Yes, yes, good afternoon.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's my pleasure to be, part of these discussions and talk about innovations, that are critical for the small-scale farmers. And to be specific, in the COMESA member states, we have roughly about 80 million smallholder farmers. And what is critical is to increase their productivity so that they can not only increase their productivity, but have access to incomes and better livelihoods. And so for today, I'll make presentation on what we have done on the seed harmonization in the last almost 10 years now. And I should say that the benefits, the importance of the harmonization in the context of COMESA or in the region, cannot be overemphasized. From my experience, is that harmonization of the seeds that we have done, or even technologies, they ensure that high quality, seed is produced together with consistency. It also makes sure that the safe movement of the seeds. I think I'll be talking more of the seed because I've been doing this in the last 10 years or so, that even when you move your seed consignment across the borders, you are not disseminating, pests and diseases. So with harmonization, it makes you to agree on which pest, to look at, to avoid, when seed, is crossing the borders. It's also make sure that, the private seed companies, they are looking at expanded markets. My experience has shown that sometimes companies, they have seed which they move from one season to the other, because sometimes the markets are not there. So with harmonization, they have access to regional markets. And of course, with this regional market, it stimulates innovations, breeding of crop varieties, we have the climate change, we have the beauty of also using GMO, crops, which are also critical, because as the Actesa, we have also been working on the GMOs, and we're thinking that right now we have only got 4 countries that have embraced the GMO technology by making sure that this is gazetted at national level. And so with time, we would want to use the same platform to make sure that these crops, they can reach the smaller farmers. It also helps in countries working together, making sure that collaboration, in the region of seed harmonization or technology development and dissemination is done, properly. But when I want to show you here the current status of the harmonization in COMESA is that we are doing quite well. That we have got 8 countries that have changed their laws and they have embraced COMESA, where they have even gazetted the laws that are in line with the COMESA system, which means that private companies can use the seed harmonization of COMESA and be able to trade, using the harmonized standards that have agreed upon within the COMESA. In the last 3 years or so, we've trained about 200 delegates. These are scientists in the areas of seed certification, variety release, phytosanitary and quarantine measures for seed import and export. We have the online catalog, which is working very well. And the requirement of this catalog is that the company or the breeder should confirm that this variety has been released in 2 COMESA member states, and give us a notification from the country that the variety which wants to release on the catalog is truly released in that country, so that variety can move across the borders. So far, we have 72 varieties that are on the catalog, and this will increase to 88 by the end of the year. And I want to say that the ATF, I think they have 8 varieties that will be on the catalog, which is good for us, because it means that the ATF is being practical in making sure that all the technologies of good seeds, they reach the smaller farmers. We have in place about 4.5 million physical labels at the COMESA Secretariat. I can give you an example of that is the labels. This is for the first generation certified seed, which is blue in color. And then we have the first certified seed second generation, which is red in color. This is similar to OECD in terms of the labeling.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mukuka, for that good presentation. It's great to note the opportunities that exist for harmonization within the region. Colleagues, dear participants, before we go to the next moderator, I request we take a poll There's going to be, let's take 1 minute to participate in the poll that will flash on the screens. And also to remind you that let's use the chat box to put our questions and comments. Okay, I hope a number of you have already submitted. As our next presenter is coming up on, you can finish up the poll. Hey, Mr. Sandakiri, we are glad to have you with us today. Enlighten us on the importance of biosafety regulation and how it affects commercialization of innovative agricultural technologies. Over to you, Sandy. It seems we have lost our presenter. Sandy, are you there? Okay. Since we cannot connect up with Sandy, let's have our next moderator. At least we have heard from the two of the panelists. We're supposed to have heard from Sandy so that our next moderator can give examples on those. But with what we have, may I now request Dr. Francis Nangayo to share some of the experiences from AATF on the issues presented so far, and we can revisit them when Sandy comes back. Over to you, Francis.
Can you see my slide?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Once again, thank you very much, moderator, and thank you all participants for finding time to join in this webinar series that this time round has been themed around the area of enabling environment as an integral component for safeguarding and commercializing agricultural technologies in Africa. As many of you may be aware, having had this explained by the moderator, the subject of accessing, adapting, and delivering technologies to smallholder farmers is a very important one because it's a subject that speaks to our quest for agricultural transformation in Africa. It is also a subject that is very central to the mission of AATF. And as AATF, we conceptualize this subject of access and delivery of technology as encompassing 5 interrelated components shown here from the upstream side, entailing scouting of productivity enhancing technologies and getting contractual arrangements with the technology owners. And after doing this, then this sets the stage for early product development, basically to demonstrate proof of concept that in turn then leads us to go into adaptation trials, and then pass on the technologies for deployment, marketing, and commercialization. And as you can see, this conceptual framework is very, very clear. But in practice, I want to add that things do not flow along this schematic diagram as seamlessly as I've shown here. In fact, as a matter of fact, there are a number of factors in this space that operate as critical success factors to enable success or failure of this noble intention to deliver technologies to the farmers. And these factors are what we call enablers. We call them enablers. Professor Ralph Christie at Cornell University, who works in this area very intensely with his team, have defined the subject of enabling environment as being a set of policies, regulations, institutions, and support services, markets, and other conditions that collectively align to create a conducive atmosphere where enterprises, including agriculture, can start, develop, and thrive on a sustainable basis. That is a very clear definition of enablers or enabling environment, so to speak. And I think that it is very important because it is a prerequisite in the field of agriculture for unleashing the potential for boosting agricultural productivity that can then translate into addressing food and nutrition security, even tackling aspects of poverty alleviation. And having said that, I'll now spend the rest of my time to share with you the experiences that AATF, working in unison with several partners, that we have been doing to prop the emergence of an enabling environment for delivery of technologies, especially those that are supportive to smallholder farmers in Africa. And here I will focus on 4 areas. The first one being our involvement in the area of policy assessment and advocacy to help catalyze desirable policy reforms. I will also be speaking about our engagement in the subject of institutional capacity enhancement as a way of building an enabling environment for technology delivery. And I will also speak about our efforts as AATF in promoting the subject of stewardship. Stewardship as a mark of best practice in delivery of technologies. I will then conclude by talking about the commitment that AATF and partners have invested in providing legal and allied resource support to help our partners ensure compliance with country regulations, as well as manage litigation when such eventuate. Now, I must highlight that one of our aspects of our work generally focuses on the seed sector, and here we delve into the subject of policy and advocacy. And why seed? We focus primarily on seed because we know that seed is a foundation of agricultural development, and that this narrative has been explained many times, and we know about it. We also know that seed, especially in many African countries, the seed subsector is generally marginally developed. I say this because Africa's seed subsector contributes a paltry 2% of the global seed trade. 2%, just imagine. And the reasons for this are many. Some of them are to do with policy, regulatory, and institutional challenges. And so ATF, through several of our project partnerships, have engaged in the area of conducting rapid seed policy assessments to identify major gaps in this area, to prioritize these pressing challenges so that we can then tackle these with the appropriate interventions. And I want to quickly then say that we don't just stop at assessment and reporting what the challenges are on the ground, but we follow up this by engaging the policymakers and other stakeholders. And while this work is ongoing, I'm happy to report, moderator, that there are some emerging results out of this effort. For instance, this effort recently was catalytic to the passage of a comprehensive seed policy in Uganda in 2018. This effort was also responsible for steering the passage of several laws in a number of countries, such as the seed decrees in the DR Congo, the passage of the recent passage of the plant variety protection law in Malawi, the passage of the seed law in Liberia. I can only emphasize that the passage of the seed law in Malawi kind of speaks to what my colleague Ben talked about, that plant variety protection is very important to incentivize breeders on the one hand and the private sector that commercialize seed technology. So we are very happy that we were able to contribute to this in Malawi. In addition, this effort was also able to result into updating of seed variety catalogs in Congo. It has also produced a protocol that will be used to accredit agro-input suppliers as a way of stemming on fake seed. If seed can be sourced from credible suppliers, then you can count of that seed as being seed worth its name. I can also mention that we have not only been working at national level, but we have worked collaboratively with regional institutions like COMESA through policy dialogue events that will help in regional harmonization of regulations. Away from that, and very closely related, and you will hear this from my colleague Akile, I just want to quickly chime in by saying that ATF has also been active in policy advocacy engagements relating to innovative technologies such as GM crops. The picture on the left-hand side here shows how the regulatory landscape was in Africa some 10 years ago. And you can see only 6 countries are colored green to show that there were countries that had functional regulatory systems for GM products. The rest had several challenges of one kind or another, ranging from absence of detailed regulations in places like Nigeria at that time and also Ghana, to absence of regulations in Mozambique. And it is important to note that there are countries here which are shaded red. These are countries which had laws, all right, but these were not laws that were enabling to the harnessing of agricultural. But in fact, there were laws that were prohibitive, laws that had very strict liability provisions that would only keep away the technology. You will hear more about this when my colleague Akile talks, because he's a lawyer and you can take what he says all the way to the bank. But let me just move on to tell you that the picture then on the right shows how the landscape has changed over the time, the countries having moved from just 6 to 11 countries, thanks to efforts by ATF, by UDA-NEPAD, by PBS that has engaged regulators in these countries to not only pass laws, but also develop detailed regulations that can handle GM crops from testing all the way to commercialization. Away from policy, I want also to mention that ATF has also worked together with other institutions in institutional capacity enhancement, and particularly focusing on the area of human resource and technical capacity limitations. And you may be already aware that we really, in Africa, in most countries, we have limited number of seed inspectors. We also have fewer accredited facilities for seed testing. And the variety release process in some countries can take as long as 3 years. And that does not bode well with what we intend in terms of delivering technologies. Even worse, challenges to do with seed production are commonplace, and licensing models between private sector actors and the public sector have also not been that good. And so ATF, working alongside development partners, alongside like-minded organizations like AGRA and others, have been engaged in capacity enhancement efforts. I could talk more about this, but moderator, allow me just to highlight 3 things. Number one is that ATF, about some 5 years ago, pioneered the establishment of the first ever early generation seed production company in Africa called the QBS. And QBS is now deeply involved in producing quality foundation seed, a move that we know will really help enterprise development in the seed sector. In addition, ATF has also taken leadership in what we now call the African Hybrid Rice Alliance. In other words, getting the actors in the right value chain to be well integrated so that we can engender efficiencies around the rice value chain. ATF has also been working on piloting licensing models in our project called the Seeds to Be, where the focus has been on helping in licensing arrangements that can steer the commercialization of outstanding varieties of pulse crops such as soybean and vegetables such as tomatoes in Malawi, Zimbabwe, and very soon in Uganda. Let me also add that there is one area that ATF has invested quite a bit, and this is the area of product stewardship. This, in other words, is just promoting responsible and sustainable commercialization of products. So stewardship, therefore, is just the responsible ethical management of products from inception all the way to product discontinuation. And ATF takes stewardship very, very seriously. That's why at ATF you will find a dedicated strategic business unit staffed by very well qualified staff in the area of product stewardship, who have helped to mainstream stewardship in all our projects, focusing on critical areas of stewardship such as quality control, quality assurance, insect resistance management, and so on and so forth. Lastly, for reasons of time, I also want to say that as ATF, we have been very committed to supporting our partners, to supporting our collaborators by providing them with the requisite legal resource support. For instance, ATF has developed a compliance electronic notebook, which is a software application to ensure biosafety compliance. And compliance is so important as it helps to mitigate against litigation. Related to this, ATF has also developed a case management system, an online system that helps us to generate biosafety litigation reports And this system is so robust that it can also send you an email alert for court cases that are coming up. I want just to emphasize this, that in addition to all this, AITF does provide technical expert advice to the bar and to the bench. I know that lawyers, be they judges or advocates, are learned people, but learning is a continuous exercise. So in this regard, we also help to improve their knowledge base by adding the aspect of biosafety into this aspect of legal jurisprudence. Mr. Moderator, let me conclude by saying that commercialization is very important, and we ordinarily take it to be only dependent on a robust product development pipeline. The truth of the matter is that a product development pipeline is very important, but just as important is a conducive enabling environment of policy, regulations, and institutions that are essential to sustain product commercialization. AITF and partners, who I will acknowledge in the forthcoming slide, have supported therefore policy, regulatory, and best practices through many of our projects. And I really thank you for listening to me, and I acknowledge the contribution of all these partners that we have worked with in this regard. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Dr. Francis, for those interesting examples. Indeed, the work being done is very interesting and demonstrates the applicability of the various elements presented by the other two speakers. Colleagues, our other speaker, Mr. Sander Kelly, is back. But before we go to him, I request you take a minute off to fill in the polls. We are going to have the polls from Dr. John Puka's presentation and from Dr. Francis Nangayo at the same time. They are going to flash on your screens. So I request you take a minute and you fill them in, and then we shall go for our next presenter. Thank you. Okay, thank you. We are about, I can see a number have already come in. We appreciate that. Now let's go to our next presenter. Mr. Sander Kiri, you're welcome. Sorry to have dropped off because of internet issues, but glad that you're back. Could you enlighten us on the importance of biosafety regulation and how it affects commercialization of innovative agricultural technologies? Over to you, Sander.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much, moderator. I'm very glad to be part of this great, wonderful meeting. I'm sorry, truly, I dropped off. But to begin with, as I said earlier on in my introduction, that science, technology, and innovation at the platform of the African Union is seen as the one that will lead to our transformation, the Africa we all want, the Africa we want in the next 50 years. I'm going to do a presentation. I'll say in the last 10 years, the ABNA program at the African Union AUD and EPAD has been mandated to support African countries in developing functional regulatory systems, especially for the adoption of biotech or the tools of biotech. And we're glad we worked for the 10 years with many partners. AATF is one of them, in trying to make sure African countries support this, especially in the agri-biotech, where it's revealed that agricultural productivity will be a very big boost towards Africa's food security. I'm going to do about 7-8 slides, but before I delve into my slides, I would like the participants to get knowledge of a few things here, especially in arrangement or layers of legislation or legal instruments. As you see the lineup here, we have international law, we have national legislation. We could have, depending on the kind of jurisdiction, we could have a provisional legislation, but also we will have implementing regulations, then other bylaws, policy, and procedure. Now, these layers are very important in the conversation around legislation, development legislation within a country. You realize that each layer here can influence every layer below it. Now, but no layer above it, okay? That's how important this is as we get into understanding the impact of legislation and policy towards the technology uptake on the continent. Now, to begin with, we should reflect that about 20 years ago, if not nearing now 30, the conversation that led to the adoption of the Convention on Biological Diversity is key in this conversation of harnessing biotechnology. If we all recall, articles within the convention provided how useful biotechnology could be key towards supporting the 3 pillars that stand as the cornerstones of the convention. The 3 pillars are conservation of the biodiversity. The second one is sustainable utilization thereof, and the third is access and benefit sharing. But the conversation at the time, from the onset, did acknowledge the important role that biotechnology can play. So it implored nations to develop a standalone legal framework or model, which will then support countries put in place functional regulatory system. And thus the Cartagena Protocol that was developed, and subsequent protocol that came up was the supplementary protocol specifically for liability and redress. Now, these are key legal operations that inform the discussions then up to today as we speak. The continuous discussion around nations developing policies and regulatory systems to enable an environment for adoption or safe adoption or harnessing of these technologies is centered around these international instruments. Now, to date, we have it on record that almost all global members have ratified the convention, except 2, and up to 89% of African countries are parties to the Cartagena Protocol. Now, under the Cartagena Protocol, once you're a party by acceding to it or ratifying it, then you're obligated to domesticate. So we've noticed that a number of countries within Africa have gone ahead to put their obligations into effect by taking it through, by developing policies, legislations, regulations, and also defining the procedure. Now, it's important for us to understand this, that policy is key, and policies should be a good policy that will enable these technologies to be harnessed. Meaning what has been proven in our experience over the years on the continent is that policies is desired to be science-based, where it will then enable legislations to be developed that will speak towards supporting the technology, not in other words, having a co-evolutionary kind of policy or legislation versus innovation. Meaning as you put together your innovation, then legislation is there to enable a responsible utilization or use of the technology. So legislation is informed by policy. Now, legislation will have an outlook. It will provide mechanisms for good management and its enforcement. where it will lay the basic structure. It has to provide good interpretation, a good clear scope, administrative mechanism for operation. It should also provide for aspects of errors, commissions, and omissions, and then that could be followed through by aspects of liability redress for purposes of accountability. Now, towards having a very successful legislation, it's also important that regulations should be there. Now, regulations arise from powers delegated to a specific officer that could be a minister within the agency or responsible for the agency to see that regulations are developed for purposes of implementing the legislations. These are key. Also, procedures ought to be developed. These procedures will provide for a consistent decision-making process. It will lead to integrity that out of the decision, and it will also it can win respect and acknowledgement from the users of the technology or the beneficiaries of such decisions. Now, I will delve into showing you a map of Africa for now, which shows the current status of regulation, ongoing developments in the adoption of the GM technology or the tools of biotechnology. Now, the map of Africa here has three phases. Now, the three phases is the one of the blue. Now we see green all. Now, there are countries within the green are also littered or dotted with golden star. Now, to begin with the blue that our key right at the bottom shows, these are countries that have been part of this conversation at the global scene, that is auspices of the Convention of Biological Diversity, Cartagena Protocol, or other protocols. But to date, they have not put in place regulatory frameworks in their countries. Now, that is the beginning of the challenge. Once you do not have a defined regulatory process, it is the first challenge that prospective investors will face. They will turn back, not having any interest in making an entry in such a country, because there is no clear framework for purposes of decision making and also the deployment of various products in that case. Now we have another phase of countries that are green. Now these green countries clearly show to us that they have frameworks. They have a biosafety framework whereby they have a policy in place, then they have legislation, could be substantive legislation, or those that are piecemeal, and they have adopted them for purposes of making decisions or regulating these technologies on the continent. Then we have also another chunk of nations, as you see, within the green that have golden stars marked. Now, these are countries that have gone ahead, not only putting in place regulatory frameworks, but they have gone ahead to show to the world that they can make decisions whereby any prospective developer or a research scientist can put an application for purposes of consideration of to enable them deploy some of these either in their research facilities or in the field in an open environment. So you will see in these countries, there's a trace of activities going on. Now, even then, there are 4 in this lot that have even put some of the products into the market. South Africa is one of them. Sudan is one of them. Burkina Faso has been in that experience. Ethiopia is close to that. Kenya is making serious decisions along this line, and they are almost there. Malawi too. Nigeria has made a decision for purposes of deploying some of the, I think that's the crops such as cotton. And very recently, I think Cowpea also had a decision that came out. So that is what this map shows, to show the status currently of regulation and GM activities on the continent. Now that launches me to take interest in discussing with you something about liability and redress. Now, as I mentioned in the earlier slides, that a mechanism within a legislation will provide for checks, accountability, where it provides for errors, omissions, and commissions. Now that as a result would lead so as liability has to be identified. And once liability is identified, and then redress, compensation will come soon. So liability presents us the quality or the state of being legally obligated or accountable. Then the redress aspect is the compensation. Now, most legislations, legislators or the legislative chamber will feel that they have a duty and responsibility to their public to have these clauses within the legislations for purposes of ensuring accountability, so that all parties are safeguarded from any unlikely event. So we find until to date that there are pillars that guide us, theories that guide us within our regulatory systems that speak so much to liability and redress. Over the years, these have evolved. They have evolved around the aspects of customs. They have evolved around common law, where common law considers precedents that have built many years. Then also the statute law, where our legislative chambers sit in their legislative assembly and develop some of these liability and redress aspects. Then there are also others that are out of administration. Now, an administrative agency that is responsible for deployment or regulation in a country could come up with administrative decisions that will be key towards liability and redress. To date, liability in most of the countries in the sub-Saharan Africa has built around the common law theories of liability, where negligence has to be proved, or trespass has to be proved, nuisance has to be proved. Now you find that this batch of liability is fault-based, where the complainant has to show what we call a cause of action, that I have a right and that right was breached, and that right was breached by so and so. So in that regard, this would be, in my view, pretty clear theory or pathway towards finding someone liable, and then compensation could be determined as provided under the law or as an administrative arrangement can provide. Then there's another theory also that has evolved for many years, that's the strict liability. Now, this strict liability presents itself as a very strict kind of redress or strict kind of liability regime, where it tends to provide for what we call vicarious liability. In other words, not only one person standing on the path could be viewed in the event of any act that is negligent, but it will be viewed, a long chain of group or persons or people could be tied to a string of liability that may arise. In other words, this kind of liability disregards any act that is of any care that is arising from the complainant or from the offender, whereby an offender may have acted with utmost care to prevent any fault, but the strictness in this kind of liability will still make him liable. Now, this has evolved from an Old English case where it tried to pronounce that if a person keeps something that is non-natural or dangerous on his compound, then, and it escapes from his control, then he takes responsibility. Now, this theory of liability and redress has presented a very big challenge. As I said earlier on, that legislators tend to feel they should secure the public. Now, in other words, the view that is on the ground presents that GM crops, so for example, are either non-natural or they are abnormally dangerous. So the legislator intends to ignore even the well-proven scientific theories around risk assessment, which could be conducted to establish substantial equivalence that a crop may have with its conventional relatives, and it could be deployed with the minimum regulatory aspect or regulatory mechanism. But in this case, the legislator tends to ignore, but he opts for a strict kind of, because it's deemed that the GM crop is either non-natural or abnormal. Now, associated with this liability regime is normally a very huge redress redress compensations, a mechanism that is less attractive, where even depending on the jurisdiction, the offender could end up being jailed depending on a specific jurisdiction. Now, this is where a challenge is presented to all those prospective investors of these products or materials in the countries we've seen. Now, the consequences, as I've just said, that strict liability presents a very difficult challenge. And this has been opted for because there's been quite a lot of lobbyists that normally lobby for this, especially where they see a nation has a policy that will proceed to harness these emerging technologies. And then their argument is that it will present other reasons, can be not healthy for humans, animals, or to the biodiversity. So the bargain has always been to have strict liability kind of thing in order to create extra responsibility, and sometimes very undesirable. Now, nations with strict liability have been very less attractive to prospective commercial investors. And we've seen the challenge that to date, as the conversation has been there for the last almost 20 years, only maybe 4 countries have so far rolled out this, and they're into the commercial, enjoying their bioeconomy, so to say. Now, also what we've noted as consequences is that strict liability kind of regime presents uncertainty where no investor will want to delve into the environment because decision-taking becomes very difficult. And as I said, that the penalties could be very undesirable, could be so costly, and what could be pronounced by courts of law could close down a company. So it becomes undesirable. There are lessons learned over the years. The lessons learned is that nations should look to policies that are science-based, that will enable good legislations to be developed. Also, lessons learned are that as the legislations are being developed, they should avoid texts or languages that will cause regulatory hurdles. We've seen some countries in sub-Saharan Africa that have legislations that have stretched the scope so wide, the scope of their legislation so wide, to include issues that are not to do with agri-biotech or other aspects. Now, that presents a challenge. Not only that, you find texts that are well accepted in terms of interpretation and definition in the international instruments to which they are parties to. They have gone extra mile to define aspects wrongly. Now, also viewing risk assessments in some legislation, you find it is not premised on science. It invokes so many other angles of social life, which is very difficult. I can give you an example, moderator, allow me, that you will realize that in some laws on the continent, that issues to do with the socioeconomics, they will come in to consider issues to do with cultural, religious, and all that, which is even very difficult to prove in the courts of law if a matter may go to court. So that presents a very big challenge. Now, this is what I think ATF has been doing best, including OFAP, but I think outreach is very key. We learn that well-organized outreach, designed outreach will create an enabling ground for the development of legislations, and even at times good for development of policy. But where this outreach has not been well rolled out, it presents a very big challenge. It brings me back to another useful instrument, which is the supplementary protocol to the Cartagena. That's the Nagoya Kuala Lumpur. We also discovered that this, which has now come into force, effective to 2018, February, this instrument presents very good administrative mechanism for liability and redress. If nations had taken the chance to look at what it provides, it will create a very enabling ground, which would lead to what we call co-evolution, because it treats the administrative aspects where the regulator can assess damage that has been caused, then can also lead the legislator to see what kind of compensation should be done. Is it a remediation? Is it returning to the status quo, the earlier status quo? All these administrative approaches, and even it identifies who the operator is in this case, a person who is issued with the permit. So that's very useful lesson learned, that the Nagoya Kuala Lumpur supplementary protocol would be very useful in terms of this. Then lastly, I wish to say that also application of our traditional liability regimes, which countries have in their civil liability legislations and many other legislation, will be very effective because they have been in use. They are well understood by courts of law. People or those around the public know what happens if in the event of a spill, in the event of unwarranted spillover of any of these materials. So we find that an application of some of the national liability regime that exists within the civil liability framework is very key. And some countries have actually done that. Ghana, for example, has it that way. I think even the legislation of Kenya talks about that. So we really appreciate that. And these are some of the lessons learned. As I said earlier, in the last 10 years, we've worked closely with a number of partners, and we are very grateful that they have been very supportive of the efforts of African Union and its agencies to see that regulation is developed and countries put in place policies that can enable them harness some of these emerging technologies that are key towards our transformation. So thank you. I would like to acknowledge the support and the partnership that we have had with all these groups that I've seen here, Michigan State University, AATF. We have a long-standing partnership, and all these that are flashed here, we acknowledge their support towards our work in the last 10 years. Otherwise, thank you very much, and I look forward to responding to questions that may be put to me. Thank you.
To address liability and redress issues around biotech. Again, dear participants, we are requesting you take a minute and fill in the poll that we fashion your screens on Sunday's presentation. Just 1 minute as we are soon ending our webinar. Colleagues, with the few minutes remaining, we shall take a few of your questions that you have posted, and most of it, all of it will be addressed to the panelists and they will be giving the answers. But we can take a quick look at one of them, which is from Peter in Kenya to John Mukuka. What has been the experience so far in terms of the buy-in of the private and seed companies and the registration of their varieties in Kenya? What are some of the challenges in sustaining the varieties in the catalog? John, are you there?
Yes, Chair. Yes, I'm there. And
you get the question?
Yes, I got the question. I think my understanding is that companies within Kenya registering their varieties on the COMESA catalog, the answer is yes. And so far, we have more than 3 companies that have registered their varieties on the COMESA catalog. For example, Kenya Seed Company, Advanta Seed from Kenya, the East African Seed Company. All these have registered their varieties on the COMESA catalog, and the issue of maintaining them, I think, is not there. The only thing that we want to do is that in the in the course of 2021 is to support them now to use the system, test the system, so that their varieties can move across the COMESA member states in the course of next year.
Okay, another quick one to Ben from Sylvester. What does it take for a country to be a member of UPOV? If you could give a quick answer on that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This is a very important and interesting question. In order for a country or regional organization to become a member of UPOV, because indeed, so far there are 76 members of UPOV, and 2 of them are regional organizations, the European Union and the African Intellectual Property Organization. It takes that the first step will be to develop a legislation, so PVP or Plant Breeders' Right legislation, in line with the latest act of the UPOV Convention. Then this legislation will be checked by the UPOV Council on the request of the country. And if it's in line and contains all the key provisions of the latest act, and once the legislation is in force in the country or in the region, then the authority can deposit its instrument of taxation and become member of UPOV. This is a very interesting way to harmonize system and to make sure that both on the legal and technical side, there is an harmonization amongst members, guaranteeing that the cooperation and the collaboration between members could be done in a very effective way for a different element in terms of examination, in terms of reciprocity of title and all that. So we have a lot of documentation and guidance, and we at the Secretariat will be happy to also offer assistance if there is any country or organization willing to investigate that further. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Ben. And the last one, a quick one to Sandy. Please share your experience on how AUDA NEPAD has been helping countries to enact biosafety laws that do not have strict liability provision as a way of facilitating GM technology commercialization in Africa. Sandy? Oh, it seems Sandy has dropped out. Okay. A quick one again to John. What is the timeline for streamlining variety registration processes and timelines for crops like Irish potatoes, which are now being commercialized across Kenya and East Africa? For instance, for new maize varieties, there were steps to accept data from similar agroecologies to shorten the timeliness of new variety registration. Is there a similar process for Irish potatoes? A quick answer to that, John?
Yes. Yeah, the procedure is the same for the other crops. COMESA has 12 crops that we have harmonized, and the Irish potatoes is one of them. So the procedure is simple, is that we need to have confirmation that that Irish potato variety has been released in 2 COMESA member states. And we will need also to have, as a requirement, to have the DUS and the VCU or the NPT data, which normally a breeder or a seed company has that information. So they will have to have that information submitted to COMESA. So registering Irish potatoes on the COMESA catalog is the same like the other varieties. On COMESA right now, we have many of the varieties. We have the maize, we have beans. We have also got Irish potatoes. We have also, and so we are looking forward for more, crops, seed crops on the catalog, including the Irish potatoes that the company would want to register on the COMESA catalog.
Okay, thanks very much, John. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we wind down, let me extend a half a minute each to each of our panelists to give their final remarks, their parting shots. Starting with you, John, since you have just talked. Your quick remark.
Thank you very much, Chair. Our final remarks from COMESA is that a lot of investment has been done, technically in developing the harmonized regulations, coming up with the online COMESA catalog, coming up with the labels. And so what we're looking forward, to make this being actualized, because we have, out of the 80 million smallholder farmers, it's only 20% that have access to quality and improved seeds. Globally, our seed, that we have within the COMESA countries, including Africa, is about 2%, which is very minimal. And so we, as COMESA, we want to work with us so that we can make a difference and increase our, productivities, which has been quite low, especially on cereals. In the last 30 years or so, we have been producing our cereals, including maize, at about 1.5 tons per hectare, and the varieties that we have on the catalog, some of them, they go up to 14 tons per hectare. On average, I think the one that we have, they are 10 tons per hectare. So if they can have access to those varieties, that will make a difference in terms of the effort, in terms of the benefits that they can enjoy from what COMESA has done in harmonized seed regulations within the 21 COMESA member states. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, John. Over to you, Ben. Your parting shot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and dear participant. It was a real pleasure to be with you today. And I think the composition of the agenda of this webinar and the panel was very appropriate, because we all have a role to play in what you call this enabling environment to create what is needed and required to really foster, trigger innovation and release this innovation to the farmers in order to address all those different elements in terms of production, quality, and food security that we need to address in the coming years. So that will be a pleasure for UPOV to continue the collaboration with ATF and all relevant partners, and any other interested participant to get in contact with us. And we'll be happy to explain how IP, intellectual property, and plant variety protection and UPOV membership play a very crucial role in this matrix about triggering innovation in the agricultural sector. Thank you very much, and we'll remain in contact.
Thank you, John. Over to you, Francis.
Yeah, thank you, moderator. One more time. Just two things. When I was talking about the enabling environment, I did obviously mention that it entails policies, it entails legislation and institutions, things that really fall at the doorstep of governments. And therefore, I just wanted to add that ATF and many other actors may be doing policy to create an enabling environment, but actually governments have a responsibility, a statutory duty of care to set up an enabling environment that can allow for commercialization of productivity enhancing technologies. And number two, I wanted also just to share with our distinguished participants that policy reforms or policy formulation and implementation takes time. And especially at this time and age where the emphasis is on consultations, stakeholder consultations, public consultations. And therefore, if you hear that we have been working on seed, don't really get fatigued. It takes time because it is a consultative process and very engaging that necessarily takes time. Thank you very much again.
Thanks, Francis. And lastly, over to you, Sunday. Your last parting shot in less than a minute, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you, ATF and all the partners that have taken part in this. We, as I said clearly, for the union, is up to see that agriculture is very much involved in on the continent. As we all know, that the majority of our population on the continent is the youth. Now, it's desired that we make agriculture attractive, where the youth can come and where we see the productivity increase. Certainly, we'll be able to see employment. We'll be able to see that we have bettered our food security challenges. Then certainly we'll prosper, as we are bound to have better improved GDPs, and it is for the good of the continent. So we really thank all the partners that are working together over the years. I've seen us score results, but we've not scored much. We have to keep going so that at the end we'll be able to, just as Francis has implored that government should do what is very useful to enable the enabling policies. I think we'll all join hands in doing that, reaching to countries, calling on them to see how they make the policies better, so as we can harness these technologies that are very useful to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandy, and dear participants and all of us all, on behalf of the ATF and the entire production team, I want to extend a very hearty thank you to all our participants for their consistent engagement and being with us. And also we look forward to you joining us in the next webinars. Well done to our esteemed panelists, by the panel of experts, for educating and enlightening us today. We are eternally grateful. Till next time, adios.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Great job. And
Thank you.
Looking
Ben.
forward to our discussion for some cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you too. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.